In the biblical text, there's a lot of great information. I always say this, but there's also great spiritual information if you can discern it. There's information that if you read it and if you understand it and you actually act on it, it can actually give you a positive change and a positive effect in your life. But there's also some things in there that are not positive, and if you act on those things, it will give you a negative effect. In other words, for example, there's a lot of slavery in the Bible. So it depends on what your own personal internal intentions are and how to use that information. I went through a very tumultuous and very stressful situation, and then the attacks came. A lot of very, very evil attacks. Which were against myself and my family. People trying to show up at our house, people trying to show up at our office. People actually showed up at the office. A lot of racial slurs, a lot of death threats, over 1,000 death threats. So I had to contact the FBI, we had to contact the file police reports, and over the difference between spirituality and religion, which is really what I thought I was going to go there to talk about. And this is what came from that side towards us. So I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to sit there and pretend like it was easy. It was very, very hard dealing with it.
Billy Carson, welcome back on Just Tap In, brother. Just like we always start off, what are you most excited about right now in your life?
Right now, I'm most excited about the growth in my relationship with my wife, to be honest with you. It's not always going to be about growth in the business or growth in finances or growth in other areas. That's great stuff too. But sometimes you have to look for growth inside of your own household. And I just see a significant amount of growth as we made our 1-year wedding anniversary in December and had a great time. We were able to celebrate that. For those who don't know, I almost died in September. So I'm sorry, December was the anniversary. September was the month that I almost passed away with pneumonia. And so I'm just really more happy about the growth within the relationship. That's one of the biggest things that I'm excited about right now.
And when it comes to marriage and relationships, what do you attribute this growth that you're talking about mostly to?
It's a real will and want and need to want to fight for one another on a day-by-day basis. I think a lot of people get into relationships, long-term relationships, thinking it's going to be easy because I love this person so much and this is going to be a breeze and a piece of cake. And I'm here to tell you that's not always the case. Unfortunately, I have been married before. And so I've had some time to go through the complete process of getting married and, getting divorced. And unfortunately, even being in some toxic relationships as well. So from that perspective, I was able to analyze and break down what are the things that I personally did wrong, or how could I have improved these relationships? Not always pointing the finger to the other person, but also looking back at yourself and being honest with yourself and saying, hey, what could I have done better? And then working on that. So by the time I got into this relationship with Elizabeth, I was more than ready and willing to work on the things that I feel like I had failed in the past, which would be communication, which is one of the biggest keys in any relationship. Good, solid communication, where you put the ego down and you open and you're vulnerable and able to communicate and have a two-way conversation. Actually, listening is another big problem I used to have. Listening to the other person. You have to be willing to sit there, zip that lip, throw that key away, and listen to the person wholeheartedly and empathetically, and try to then position yourself in their shoes, from their mindset, from their perspective. That's very hard for a lot of people to do. And some people don't even know you should do that, but that's what I have been able to do. And she's been able to do that same exact cycle with me. And by doing that, we've been able to grow strongly together and build this really, really strong relationship. And then the fact also that she helped save my life, just a few months ago. She was an integral part in me being alive and being on this podcast today, literally. And that also strengthened our bond as well. And of course, our recent battles with the trolls and so forth online. So all that has just brought us together and made our relationship so much stronger and so much better.
Yeah. And I found that pointing fingers is almost like the biggest paradox in the world, because when you look at it, if I'm pointing a finger, well, my thumb's not as flexible, but my thumb's pointing back at me. And that's kind of part of that taking accountability of, when we are in a relationship with someone or we're dealing with external people, it's, seeing them as that mirror. What are they here to teach us? And the last time we got together in person, it was the most coincidental thing because I was on a tour in Egypt. You were just arriving in, Giza Plateau for your tour in Egypt. And I was like, I think I'm going to go to the gym because I just felt a call to go there. Yeah. And of course you were there and you told me, yeah, I'm recuperating from this experience that I had from pneumonia. And I think it was the closest you've ever been, maybe in this life, to the spirit world. Yeah. So I would love to touch on that story of how you were able to, in a way, cross that, veil, see, peer into what's on the other side, and then come back even stronger.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a really gut-wrenching experience. We were on a tour actually in Turkey when this happened. I got to Turkey completely healthy, feeling decent at least. And in some way, I got a bacteria in my lung. Some bacteria somehow got into my lung and it grew extremely rapidly. So I started going down the tubes. By day number 3 in Turkey, I was already in a feverish, sickened state. And I don't get sick that often. By that point, I only had 9 colds in my entire life. And that would have been makes my 10th time. And I thought it was a cold. I thought I was sick, but I usually get over colds, boom, like that. Within 2 days, man, I just shake it off and I'm feeling better and I'm on the way back to recovery so fast. So I kept thinking, I'll just turn the corner and I'll be all right. So initially, I wasn't really complaining much about not feeling that well because I'm not a big complainer and crybaby. But we got to Nemrut Mountain and we had to hike up the mountain at about 4 a.m. because you got to make it before the sunrise. And the whole tour is there and I'm leading the tour. And then all of a sudden I'm falling behind in the tour. Our people are passing me and I can't keep up. And I'm stopping and I'm trying to catch my breath. And that's when I knew oh man, something is really wrong. Because normally when I'm healthy, I can run up that incline, until we get to a few heavily rocky parts I'd have to climb, but I couldn't do it. And I actually had a fever that morning. And so I hiked up Nemrut Mountain with a fever and lack of oxygen. And I kept trying to blame it on the altitude, but it wasn't the altitude. It was my lungs being filled with fluid. And so I still was in denial. And so was my wife, really, because she knows, she had been with me 4 years and had never seen me sick, not even for 1 day. So I didn't even get the global sickness, So she was just like, yeah, you'll get over this. You're going to be fine. Then by, a few more days, I couldn't eat. I had cold sweats, shakes and everything, couldn't breathe. And I kept hearing this gurgling in my chest. I thought it was just phlegm that I would have to cough out. But the more I would cough out, the more would come. It got really crazy. Thankfully, she had something called thymosin alpha-1, which is a peptide. She had that in her travel kit with insulin needles. So she injected me with thymosin alpha-1, which gave my immune system a boost as I was going down the tubes really hard, getting into 104, 105 degree fevers, which is deadly for the brain. And I knew I had to make it back to America because we ran out of insulin needles. And we went to a few clinics and hospitals and they didn't know what the heck we were talking about. And I was like, oh no, I can't. They're going to kill me if I go into any one of these hospitals. So she had prednisone, fortunately. That helped me as well. I don't know how she had it, but she had prednisone in her bag. That opened my lungs up a little bit more, allowed us to get back to the United States. The whole flight over, I felt like if I would go to sleep on the plane, I wasn't going to wake up. So I forced myself to stay up the entire trip back. Long story short, we go to a clinic. They scanned my lungs and said, the lady gasped. She said, oh, you need to be admitted to the hospital immediately. They have to drain your lungs. You have all your lungs full on one side, completely black. And on the other side, it's almost there. You've got to get to a hospital. So we went straight to the hospital. As soon as I took my oxygen sensor test, they admitted me immediately past everyone in the hospital, gave me a bed, and started putting the hoses in my nose and the heart monitor on and everything else, taking blood samples. And they said, you are going into septic shock. Your organs are shutting down. I was like, whoa. Whew. Man, give me chills. That's when I knew I was in danger. Then I finally came to I finally admitted to myself, wow, yeah, you're really in danger. Like this is, This isn't something you're just going to wake up and turn the corner tomorrow. This is like your body is dying right now. So that night, my wife, who even we only lived 5 minutes from the hospital, she went home and packed all of her stuff and came back to the hospital. She's laying in this little reclining chair next to me with all of her stuff. She's camping out. I told her to go home, but she said, no, I'm staying here. And at around 3:00 that morning, that first night, I closed my eyes and I appeared in this other place. Now, this was the craziest thing because I closed my eyes, but my eyes were open. And I can't even explain how that feels or what that means, but my eyes were wide open, even though I know I closed them here. When I closed them, I was out of the hospital. No more heart monitors, no more hoses in my nose, no more blood, IVs in my arms and all these things, and a computer system going. In complete tranquility, in complete peace, in a place that looked like an absolute traveler or explorer's paradigm, or a place where you can go explore unlimited lifetimes. It was like, as far as the eye can see, things you would want to go check out, places you want to go, jungles to go hiking through. And then these hominid faces, they were like, look at the faces. And I was like, what faces? And they were showing me hominid faces over millions of years, different faces of people over millions of years. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. And the air was fresh and I can breathe and I can move around. I didn't have any pain. And when I wanted to go to a place there, I didn't have to walk. I could just think and I was there already. And then I said, this is crazy. What kind of dream is this? So then I forced my eyes open and I was back in the hospital bed, back with the heart monitor, back with the oxygen and all the noise and the beeping and everything else, and in complete pain and agony again. And I was like, wow. I looked over at Elizabeth, and that's when I took that famous selfie that was online. I took a selfie of us with her sleeping and me here. Like, I can't believe this just happened. I closed my eyes again, and I went back instantaneously to this place again for a second time. I forced my eyes open. I was back. I said, okay, so this is not a dream. This is a real thing. And I couldn't figure out. I said, well, am I dying right now? So I closed my eyes a third time. And on the third time, I was back there. And they said, if you want to stay here, you can stay. But if you go back, it's going to be hard. And right away, I thought about Elizabeth. We hadn't reached the 1-year anniversary. She's young. I just thought about how distraught she would be if I didn't come back. But staying there was so enticing and so easy. Like, it's just a transition. But I decided, no, I said, I'm going to go back. And when I said I'm going to go back and I forced my eyes open, I couldn't go back again. I couldn't close my eyes and reappear in that place ever again, which let me know that I wasn't dreaming. This was a real experience. And it was life-changing for me because I wasn't really totally horrified about death. I was more horrified about having a bad death, like a car crash or stabbing or some crazy weird thing happening. But I know now that at the moment that your body really begins to shut down, you transition into this beautiful place that is so tranquil and so peaceful and so heavenly. And it's almost like it's custom made just for you and what your passions are. And from what I experienced, I don't know how everybody else experienced this thing, but it was magical, man. It was really magical. It took my complete fear of death completely away. It wiped it clean from my mind. I have no fear. The next time I'm in that position where I'm getting ready to transition, hopefully it won't be for too much, it'll be further in the future, obviously, because I want to live a long life with my family. But when it comes, when it happens, when it's coming, I'll be there and I'll be aware of it and I'll be ready for it. And I'll understand it's just my time to transition to the next one.
And it's incredible how this connects to ancient Egypt as well, and their beliefs on the afterlife, the reincarnation cycles. Mm-hmm. And I've also learned that, the ancient priests and priestesses, they would have to come very close to death in order to have their great initiation and come out on the other side as these masters of reality. And, you said that you were presented with this choice. You can stay here, but if you go back, it's going to be very hard. Yeah. What hardships came out after that initiation? Did you see that as sort of an initiation that was preparing you for something bigger?
Yeah, I really did. I thought it was going to be initially, to be honest, I thought it would be me recovering from this illness. And so I thought it would be me recovering. And so as I began to try to work on recovering, I started noticing it wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be because we had a lot of tools. We have a hyperbaric oxygen chamber in the house. We have a lymph suit. We have infrared saunas and all these things, all these modalities that Elizabeth invested in and bought, which I used to think were like, why you got this stuff, But it helped me recover so much faster. And so from walking only 20 feet the first day to being able, in 2 weeks later, to be able to actually travel back to Egypt on the next tour, I couldn't go in a lot of the places because of my lungs, but I was there for support, because the people paid to come and see me and meet us. But it wasn't the recovery process, because that is hard, but not as hard as the feeling or emotion I got from when they said it's going to be hard. But not too much longer after that, I went through a very tumultuous and very stressful situation online, which had become very public. Everyone knows about it by now, where I was ambushed at a podcast into a debating situation, which I wasn't even prepared for. I didn't know who this guy was. And I was still sick at the time. I had just come out of the hospital. I had an IV bandage in my arm. Long story short, whatever, it was an embarrassing moment in my life that went viral. And then the attacks came, a lot of very, very evil attacks, which were orchestrated by these people, which were against myself, my family, people trying to show up at our house, people trying to show up at our office. People actually showed up at the office, well documented. We have them on video showing up at the office and talking to our secretary, kind of like a manhunt or a lynching, if you would, in modern day time. A lot of racial slurs, a lot of death threats, over 1,000 death threats. So I had to contact the FBI. We had to contact file police reports and contact our community, security, and everything else. It was a big, just tumultuous, just a hardcore situation to deal with. Very emotional and very stressing and taxing on the family emotionally. Threats against our child. It was only 12 years old. So when all that started coming in over the difference between spirituality and religion, which is really what I thought I was going to go there to talk about. And never once did I attack anybody. Never once did I say anything negative or nasty to anybody about anything. But this is what came from that side towards us. So I believe that this warning that it was going to be hard was this thing that had happened, which is finally at the point now where it's dying down and we're moving past it. But that was hard. It was very hard. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to sit there and pretend like it was easy. It was very, very hard dealing with it, having to hire extra security, having to walk around everywhere I go now with armed guards and things like that. That was the hard part. I think they were warning me and preparing me for that hard time, which we're phasing in right now, trying to phase out.
Yeah, for sure. And I believe that a divine birthright for us is to speak our truth. And there's a quote that I really love that I heard the other day is, there are many reflections from the river we all drink from. And all of this regarding religion, spirituality, we're all seeing it from different perspectives, but we have the ability to own our own truth about things. And many beliefs will shape then our reality. So it becomes then about what beliefs do we want to take away with us. And I know from when you were very young, your dad would make you write book reports on different books, and one of those being the Bible. So you were able to read the Bible from a lens of not like a pastor telling you this is the truth, but you came at it with a critical thinking point of view. Yeah. So what do you feel were those truths that you took away from those teachings that, are in accordance with the teachings of the Bible, but still are empowering you in your reality, and some that maybe aren't for people? Yeah.
Like I say, man, for so many years, and a lot of people, they only hear what they want to hear, I guess. But I always talk about, I did a 4-hour workshop one time where I showed tons and tons of books. I had books stacked up to the ceiling on my desk, and I went each book one at a time and give a description about the book and what's in the book and a summary about the book. And one of the books was the Bible. Now, in the biblical text, there's a lot of great information. I always say this. That's what I said even in my 4-hour workshop. There's great information in there, and great historical information too, but there's also great spiritual information if you can discern it. There's information in there that if you read it, and if you understand it and you actually act on it, it can actually give you a positive change and a positive effect in your life. But there's also some things in there that are not positive, and if you act on those things, it will give you a negative effect In other words, for example, there's a lot of slavery in the Bible, and it's condoned, not only by God, but also even in the New Testament. It's condoned and accepted and understood slavery throughout the entire Bible from the beginning to the end. Now, if a person is taking that and has a mindset as, how can I utilize this to control people and get them to believe that they're supposed to be slaves? Well, that's what they'll do, which has happened, as we know. But every slave on this entire planet has been enslaved at some point or another. Every single race, not just Black people, every race has been enslaved at one point or another. But again, if I see some things in there that are enlightening and uplifting and inspirational, well, then if I decide to say, I'd like to spread that information to the world, I can do that. And I can give people inspiration, motivation, reassurance, and I can even give them love. So it depends on what you're reading and where and when and how you discern it, and what your own personal internal intentions are and how to use that information. Like I always say, in Star Wars, they talk about the Force. Well, in quantum physics, theoretical physicists discovered that the Force is real. Yet there is this force, this energetic grid that connects everything and everyone throughout the known universe. And you can wield that energy. We can wield it. We are wielding it on a day-by-day basis without even consciously being aware of it. However, that same force, that one force, can be used for good. It can also be used for evil, just like in Star Wars, right? You have the Jedi and the Empire. The Jedi, they utilize it for the good, and the Empire, Darth Vader, decided he wanted to use the same exact energy for evil. In the Bible, in Isaiah, it says, I create the good and I create the evil. Do with that, I saith the Lord. So what he's saying in Isaiah is, he's saying that I'm creating good and evil. The force, or the energetic force that creates everything in the known universe and energetically has connected everything, is saying that it's doing the good and the evil simultaneously at once. There's a yin and a yang, basically, like, the Asian ancients always talked about this yin and yang, this good and evil, this dark and light. It exists. It permeates the entire universe. But again, it's how do we utilize this information? And I think where human beings have fallen short when it comes to religion is they've taken the whole package wholeheartedly and devoured it and swallowed it without breaking it down and picking out the parts that hurt humanity and throwing those away, and only keeping the parts that uplift and help humanity. That's what I see.
Hello, beautiful family. Quick one today. I just wanted to take a moment to thank each and every one of you that have subscribed to this channel. Your subscription means more than you know. Even though it's free, what you're doing is you're empowering a whole channel to be able to do this every single day and continue showing up in the way that we can with all of our resources on hand. Thank you for contributing to the growth of this channel, for sharing it with the people that you love, for creating a conscious movement of individuals that are seeking the sovereignty and the divinity of their soul. This is why we're here. And if you haven't already and you're enjoying this content, I invite you now to look below on that little button that says subscribe and welcome you properly to this community. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being who you are and being pure love and radiating that with everyone that you see. Back to the episode. And going a little bit deeper into that, what have you seen that leads people to this sort of like fanaticism or being too radical on one thing? Because I know you've said in the past that in your own journey, you've had moments where, you've been fanatical about certain things, or you've been a little bit radical on one certain thing. Mm-hmm. What do you think leads people to that mindset? And then how do you get out of it?
Well, one of the biggest key factors in getting into that fanatical mindset is that the information touches you so deeply, or sometimes it's been programmed into you so deeply from the time you were very young that you begin to think that, this is the end all be all. And once you make that end all be all a part of your belief system, now your body and your subconscious mind wants to protect it at all costs because it seems like a vital part of your being. So anytime any outside information or outside source comes to bring information or knowledge that challenges that belief system that now has been encoded into every cell in your body and into your DNA and even into your genetics, the body now it wants to fight that. So Agent Smith pops into your body. And Agent Smith from the Matrix pops in, and he begins to battle and fight against Neo in the Matrix to stop at all costs any type of reprogramming code getting into the actual body. It's called the Agent Smith effect. And so that's the problem that we have. And once people start going down the rabbit hole, a lot of the times they can't catch themselves because they get so caught up. Before they know it, they've gone so deep down the hole, they don't even know how to turn around and look back up to the light to climb back out of the hole. Fortunately for me, in certain situations where I felt myself slipping too deep into a rabbit hole, like I got into catastrophism, which is a word that was made up by a gentleman who wrote a book about potential collision between an asteroid and Earth coming sometime in the future. I got so caught up in it, I was completely obsessed with it, and to the point where I built an underground shelter. Which I'm glad I did that because it'll have a use and a purpose sometime in the future. But I was really caught up. And I had to come to the point where I caught myself and said, you know what, you're going over the deep end with this. You're getting too wrapped up, and you're thinking about it day, you're thinking about it at night. Every time you meet somebody, you're bringing it up. It's just too much. It's fanaticism. So I caught myself, I checked myself, and I started to, slowly step back from that mindset and allow myself to live and be a person again. I don't think the people that become fanatics in any one thing or another, a lot of times they don't realize how fanatical they've become and how radical they become based on the dogma and the programming. The only ones that make it out are the ones that catch themselves, check themselves, and begin to reprogram themselves and climb back out of that deep, dark hole, because that hole can be deep and it can be dark and it can be scary and fearful. And one thing I noticed, when you're down in that hole, it's all about fear. And that fear is a low frequency, and you begin to attract more low frequency things into your life. Once you start climbing out of the hole and going back towards the light, you can still acknowledge that this thing exists, whatever it is. But because you're seeking the light and you're looking for that higher vibration, higher frequency, you also begin to see solutions to problems. You also begin to see the good and the bad and everything else. So it's just a change and a flip in the mindset. And a lot of people need to step back and realize that, yeah, maybe I have become fanatical with this particular topic. Why am I so fanatical? Why am I thinking about this thing day and night, night and day? Why do I force it on every single person that I see? I've become a radical fanatic, and sometimes we have to analyze ourselves and check ourselves. And pretty much almost everybody's guilty of it in some way, shape, or form. It's not isolated to one group of people, but we have to recognize when we're going down that dark path.
And it stems from something beautiful, though. It's what you said. It's, sometimes these teachings or these texts, they struck a chord so deep within us that it's almost like, this is my truth, and we protect it at all costs. But that also disregards all the trillions of other truths that are out there in the universe. What I've heard you say, and I think it's super interesting to go now into where science is meeting a lot of these ancient texts. And you've said that the Quran and the Bible, they're right. We are living in a creation. Now, the method of creation is something called a fractal holographic universal matrix.
Yeah.
What is that?
Well, people sometimes they get a little offended because you're saying we're living in a hologram, we're in a holographic matrix. But it's not anything to get offended about. What I'm giving you is a solid theory backed by science on what this creation might actually be. We all know that, most people that we're living in something that's created, unless you're an evolutionist, right? So if we're living in a creation, which most people in religion actually believe, then shouldn't we sometime ponder the question, what is this creation? Like, what specifically exactly is it? And how did it come to be? We know that it says in the beginning was the word. Well, what is a word? A word is a vibration, a frequency. So let's take a look into frequencies and vibration. Let's take a look into what those can do. And when you look into cymatics, you realize that cymatics form and shape the world and the reality that we're living in. And also what happens through cymatics, it creates something called fractals on a Chladni plate. And what is a fractal? It's a pattern that repeats itself at smaller and smaller scales. And when we look at the universe as a whole, we begin to see this fractal patterning throughout the known universe. We can see a galaxy like the Milky Way It looks like the swirl on the top of your head if you still have hair, right? It also looks like a hurricane. It also looks like the Coriolis effect with water going down the drain in your sink. And I can just keep going down and down and down, right? You know, you look at an atom, you see it's got electrons orbiting it. You look at our solar system, we have planets orbiting the sun. I mean, if you look at our galaxy, it's orbiting other galaxies. I mean, I could just keep going. So a nebula is a human iris, right? And a supernova is cell division, right? So the more we look into the universe, we begin to realize, wait a minute, everything we see above is happening below. As above, so below. One of the oldest hermetic principles that exist. The ancients knew this eons ago, that what's happening on the grand scale, on the macro, is happening on the micro. And you can just keep breaking this down. You look at fruits and vegetables that are good for the body, they almost mimic the exact shape of the organ that's good. It's good for. The fractals exist. Now, Benoit Mandelbrot, a scientist, he discovers something called the Mandelbrot set. It's a very simple mathematical equation, a very small mathematical equation, which break down the fractals that exist throughout all known nature, including the human body. And this fractal mathematical formula is so incredible. It allows every frame that we need to come into existence as we need it. So Pixar Studios, who created Toy Story and all these other incredible animations, they said, you know what, let's put this into our software. And put it into the animation software, and it started creating incredible 3D animation. They became one of the most famous animators in the world, production companies in the world, because of the Mandelbrot set equation that they inserted into their program. It allowed the characters to be animated on their own. No more drawing frame by frame characters. It allows the mountains, the clouds, the sky, the movement, whatever's inside the frame to be created as it's needed on the fly, just like it is in the real world, according to quantum physics. So that's really what is a breakdown of the matrix. And the holographic part would be that when you look at a hologram, when you zoom into the smallest piece, you can see the hole in the smallest piece. You can see there's a connection between the smallest piece and the largest piece. When quantum physicists zoomed into the nature of reality, they saw the same exact thing. The only thing that they lost when they zoomed in was resolution. And the same thing happens on a computer screen. So they realized that we're living in a pixelated universe, and that light, for example, propagates pixel by pixel. And what's happening? We're living in something that may be a super advanced software program.
And along those lines, what then do you feel is your deepest understanding of a higher power? You know, if it's a pixelated universe, if it's generated by this advanced whatever it is, what is your understanding of a higher power?
My understanding is that this universe is imbued with something I call divine energy, right? This divine spark, which gives us all a certain fractal of the divinity of the creator. So we're all a fractal of the creator itself. I believe that the creator, the programmer, God, the universe, whatever anybody wants to call it, it is experiencing life subjectively through each and every one of us by this energy that's connected like a cord to each and every one of us. We're all energetically connected directly to the creator itself. And notice I say it, not a him. I don't believe that there's a him or a man that's running around in a white robe. I believe that that God is a frequency, and it's our job to tune in. This master programmer, maybe this high-level sentient frequency that exists, that has in some way been able to create this universe, and maybe even many other universes. But I believe that the higher power that exists is really ourselves, that we're connected directly to God, and God is directly connected to us, and that we're a fractal of God, because everything we know in the universe is a fractal, and that we're actually a sliver of God experiencing life as Billy Carson, as Emilio Ortiz, and whoever else exists out there. And also, not just that, experiencing what it's like to be an atom in a cup, okay? What it's like to be an atom inside, or a molecule inside of a cup of coffee. And the transformation and the alchemy that happens when someone swallows the coffee and it alchemizes and goes into cells and cell division and mitochondria. I mean, the whole thing is an experience that's happening here. And I believe that's what the real mission is here, is for God to experience itself through every aspect of the known universe.
There's, going back to the experience you had on the other side when you were seeing all of these faces of of the hominids, you know, recently there was a discovery of a new hominid which had a lot more cubic centimeters in brain capacity than humans. And it's estimated to be around 200,000 years old.
Yeah.
When you were seeing these different hominids, were you able to identify like this is way different than human and they look a little bit more advanced than us? What was that like, having it like on an experience basis?
Yeah. Seeing these massive skulls was just mind blowing, because for me, it was like a confirmation. Massive skulls, not skulls from skull binding. Skull binding reduces the cranial capacity. A lot of people go, oh, that's just skull binding. People used to do that back in the day. Not exactly. The people that were doing the skull binding were mimicking the gods according to their verbal handed down histories. Why were they mimicking the gods? Who were these gods and what did they really look like? When you look in the region, you discover they found these skulls in those same areas all over the world. Predominantly, you know, we have the Paracas skulls in Peru. And if you go to the Grand Egyptian Museum or the Egyptian Museum of Civilization, they have the mummies in. They have these weird elongated skulls as well. But these massive skulls, the further back you go, the bigger these skulls were. Now, the one you're talking about is about 1,600 cc capacity compared to a human being, a Homo sapiens sapien, at 1,350 cc capacity. What does that mean? Well, since you can't get that massive brain capacity from skull binding, we're talking about people that had brains that were significantly larger than ours. And if we're only using a small percentage of our brain capacity with the size we have, imagine if they're only using a certain percentage of their brain capacity with the size that they had. Or what if they were using almost all of it? We don't know. What if their pineal glands were larger than ours, which would make a lot of sense since everything else is larger. Their bones, their jawbone was larger, their skull was larger, their brain was larger. Hypothetically, their pineal gland could have been larger if they had one. So their spiritual antenna could be better connected to the universe. And I think that these ancestors potentially could have been much smarter than us, maybe technologically, but definitely spiritually. And also naturally, in other words, meaning they may have been directly connected to nature where they can understand, oh, a tsunami is coming. Let's move highland before it arrives, just like the animals do. They don't wait for the tsunami. They're gone. They're long gone, right? Maybe there's an earthquake coming. The animals are gone before the earthquake hits, sometimes hours, sometimes days before the earthquake even comes. They know already that it's coming. Only the house pets and human beings with cell phones don't know. And also the ability to navigate Earth via the magnetic field. We know that we have billions of magnetite crystals in our brains right now, but I can't sense the magnetic field of Earth. If I try my hardest, I don't know, I can't feel it. But guess what? When they put a human being inside of a laboratory and put a huge bar magnet in the ceiling and put an EEG cap on his head, and they moved the bar magnet around the room, guess what happened? The magnetite crystals reoriented themselves to the bar magnet. So that means they're still activated. We just are disconnected from sensing it. Now, what if these people from the ancient past with these huge skulls didn't have the disconnection that we have today through nature, that they naturally were able to navigate via Earth's magnetic field, built-in GPS, if you would, like birds and turtles that migrate. So I think that in a lot of ways, they were probably much more sophisticated, probably had telepathy, maybe even telekinesis. And these skulls, there were so many large skulls before it got to us. We're like the new kids on the block. We just got here. We are not ancient people. Now we have ancient DNA because there's a lineage. However, in terms of this format of a Homo sapiens sapien that we're in right now, we're the new kids on the block. And there are people far more ancient than us that I would consider them our cousins that were way more advanced than we are right now.
What evidence have you found that these other ancient hominids coexisted with the current Homo sapiens on Earth at one time?
Well, you can see this in a lot of ancient text, wall paintings, cave paintings, I should say, petroglyphs. But if you even look at, for example, let's take a look at Egypt. We know we have depictions of Pharaoh Akhenaten and his wife Nefertiti. We have depictions of their daughters, okay? You can go to the Egyptian Museum, the Cairo Museum, and see their heads, their busts and their heads. They were massive, massive, massive skulls. They mimic the same size of the skulls in Peru. Now, in Peru, we know that the Paracas skulls, when you date them, they existed around the same time that we can find normal Peruvian skulls as Homo sapiens. So that means that these beings with these massive skulls were living amongst people that had normal size, what we call normal size skulls. Same thing in Egypt. Now, in the Sumerian tablets, you read, for example, the Epic of Gilgamesh. We know that there were some massive people around, like Gilgamesh himself, who's often depicted holding a full-grown lion in one arm, like it's a kitty cat. This man was massive. He was a giant. He also had a buddy called Enkidu, who was a super massive giant as well. Both of them were massive, strong men that would get into battles and everything else. They were huge people. So they also lived amongst what we call regular people. Because if there weren't regular sized people or normal, what we call normal people, they would never reference Gilgamesh as a giant. They would just say, oh, Gilgamesh. They wouldn't say he was a giant, because we would all be giants if that was the case, but they weren't giants because they referenced him and Enkidu as giants. So they recognize a difference between the size, the shape, and their abilities. And you can find this literally all over the world, that there were these beings that came to visit people that looked different. Just like the Native Americans and the indigenous Americas, they talk about the red-headed giants. In some way, they were so afraid of these giants that they decided to kill them, and they killed a lot of them, actually. But it's just the stories have been found all over the world that these giants and these people with these massive bodies and massive skulls, they lived amongst regular people for thousands of years.
This is really interesting because in the book of Numbers in the Old Testament, the Nephilim, which are known as the Anak in the biblical text, it says, we were grasshoppers in their eyesight. And there, some people might say, okay, that's just like a metaphor. That could just be like a topic of interpretation. But, in your eyes, when you're reading through these texts, how do you account for the interpretation that they were saying to us in terms of, were they actually, did we actually look like grasshoppers, or were they just exaggerating because these people were just more powerful or had a higher hierarchy than them?
Yeah, good question. I look for more evidence or more similarities with more comparisons, with images. So in the Sumerian tablets, for example, we see depictions of these Anunnaki beings, or the Anuna, right? They were called Anunnaki a little bit later by the same, region in Mesopotamia. They always depict them as massive people. You can see the size difference. Even when one of these Anuna are sitting down, the people are taller than them. The people reference these beings not only as gods, but also as giants, okay? In the biblical text, they reference certain people in the Nephilim, particularly the Anak, Goliath. They reference them as giants, meaning big, large people out of the normal large, not the normal size people, but out of the normal large. And you can see this all around the planet, where people are referencing these beings as not only being gods, but being much larger than them, almost larger than life. So when you look at some of the depictions, even in Egypt, the Netiru or the Neters, you see the depictions painted in the glyphs on the wall. You see these huge Neters, and you see people up to their kneecaps in some cases, working on them, helping them, cleaning them, serving them, whatever it is. And it's like, this is unbelievable. How can all these cultures all around the world and many different continents all come up with the same exact understanding of these people? These people, in my opinion, were global people. They had traversed the entire planet. They were ruling over human beings for some time, and they were being revered as gods, but they weren't really gods. They were just masquerading as gods.
And I guess the biggest question there is, where did they go? Why are they no longer here? In these tablets or texts, do they point to the reason why these giants or these people left the planet and we're no longer seeing, 20-foot people walking amongst us?
Unless you look at the NBA, right? We got a few there. Some
Wembanyama.
Yeah, right. I mean, Wembanyama and Shaq and these people, some of these new guys coming out are hitting 8 feet. Now I have an 8-footer in Florida now who's going to go to the NBA. This is crazy. He can dunk without jumping. But so that's a little remnant DNA. But yeah, the references to these beings starts to disappear, but you get a glimpse or a hint as to why. There's a few. There's all different reasons why. The first one that we find, or the most popular one, is we know that the global flood happened, right? If not global, at least the majority of the planet in some way, multiple regions were at least flooded. Maybe the Younger Dryas incident, which we know flooded that entire region out, all the way down through Egypt, all the way down into Africa. Where there was a comet strike or an asteroid strike up there, which just decimated the area, melted all that ice, and then let it flood out through an entire area, which flooded out the Sphinx's enclosure as well. You can see the water erosion damage from the enclosure, and you can time how long that goes back. Dr. Robert Schoch estimates about 13,000 years. And he's a real geologist and a scientist at a university. So now, when this flood happens in the Bible, this global flood, it talks about the fact that it killed most of the human beings on the planet, and it killed most of the Nephilim. Now, it says at the end that some of the people and some of the Nephilim actually did survive this catastrophe, okay? But it wiped out quite a bit. So that would reduce the population of Nephilim and giants, or these Anunnaki people, to a very small number. Another account would be in the Rig Veda, Indian Veda text, the Battle of the 10 Kings, which that took place in space, believe it or not. This didn't take place on Earth, but the kings met at a place in space, in the heavens, to fight. You also have the Indian Vedas, the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita, all the wars of the gods that happened where they were killing each other and blowing each other up in these flying cities. And while the people on the ground would look up and watch, and there's depictions of these flying cities in ancient texts and scriptures and cylinder scrolls, where you could see that they drew what they saw, which looked like giant flying cities in the sky, battling and sending bombs toward each other to blow each other up. And in the Sumerian Mesopotamian tales, you discover that there were these wars of the gods, which in some of the texts, these are like pyramid wars. And these wars were fighting over humans and resources, okay? And so a lot of people were getting slain and killed, including them. In the book of Deuteronomy, in the Old Testament of the Bible, you can clearly see these wars as well, where human beings are sent out with the angels, and they go to attack other people in other towns to slaughter everyone, kill the women, kill the children, and bring the spoils of war back, which, I don't know why God would need spoils of war. It didn't make any sense to me. So I don't think it's a real God. I think it's a person that's just manipulating people. And so, but you see these wars. So I think that just like right now today, if you did a count of men versus women on the planet, you'll find that there's probably 3 times, it's probably 5 to 3 or 5 to 1 or something like that, women to men. So there's way less men on the planet than women, right? But why is that? Right now. Yeah. We're not like, this is the women and this is the men. I believe it's 3 to 1 or 5 to 1. If you look up the stat, you'll find it. And well, why is that? That's because of all the wars. All of the wars over time has allowed women who stayed home mostly to take care of the family and everything else, and most women don't go to war, to supersede, population numbers over men. And so, but where these wars come from? Most wars are fought over religious beliefs. I think more people have died over religious beliefs more than any other reason on the face of the planet in terms of wars. And then other wars are fought over greed, just pure greed, wanting to dominate and take over other people, take their land and take their resources, which is also promoted in the biblical text in Deuteronomy. So this is the reason for a lot of this. You see that like in the book of Enoch, Azazel comes down and teaches human beings how to make swords and breastplates and shields to go kill people. And I think that this combination of them even going to battle with humans and getting caught up in battle in some way also reduced their population. So it's a number of different things. Human beings attacking them, like in the indigenous Native Americans, global floods and battles and wars between each other and also between them mixed with humans, depleted the population. There's this one incident, the last one I'll mention, in the Sumerian tablets, where it talks about this one war where they released this weapon that has an evil wind. Now, this evil wind is coming across the land, and this evil wind had turned buildings into glass. That's 3,000 degree weapons fire. Now, where can we see that on Earth? the Indus Valley at Mohenjo-daro in Pakistan. The buildings are still there. They turned to glass, and the dead bodies are in the street, some still holding hands today. The bodies have never been touched or moved. And you can look these up online and search them. No evidence of any animal scavenging the bodies. The bones are higher than level background radiation. So that's a problem. Now, Enki talks about this evil wind, and he says to his father, Anu, can you stop the evil wind? He said, I cannot stop the evil wind, so get into your sky ship and forebode. That means get in your ship and get the hell out of here. And he says that the black-faced people
in basic
of the land,
terms.
yeah, right. That's what he said, get the hell out of here, man.
Get your ass out of here, bro.
I'm already in space. And he says the black-faced people of the land, their hair is falling out. Their eyes are bleeding. Their fingernails are falling off. That sounds like radiation poisoning or sickness to me, right? They said that all the animals are dying, the farm animals. And so that's telling me that something in this evil wind might be radioactive. Might be. We don't know for sure, but might be radioactive. And the evidence of this war on land has been found around the world, like in Mohenjo-daro, even in the sands of Giza. If you go deep enough, you can eventually find balls of glass, which they used to carve into scarab beetles to honor the gods. What can turn sand into glass? 3,000 degree weapons fire. So you see how the bent pyramid looks like it's been exploded from the outside? Something hit it and struck it and blew pieces off. And some of the other pyramids have been completely destroyed, or Elephantine Islands have been completely demolished. What kind of weapon did that? So again, there was a war here. And I believe that war also was another reason for the diminished numbers of these people.
Wow. We, in my recent journey in Egypt, we were there during the lunar eclipse and the solar eclipse. And on the solar eclipse, we went to the sun temple. I believe it's called Abu Sir.
Abu Sir.
And there's a plate that you can kind of stand on. Mm-hmm. And when we first got there, I ran toward it and I was like, I'm going to stand on it. And then all the guards were like, get off, get off, get off, get off. And I was like, whoa. And I'm like, why are they so protective around this plate that's there? Mm-hmm. And the person that was leading the trip, she said, this used to be a Stargate from what I've channeled, for what I've received. And it's like almost like these pyramids were acting as Stargate systems between other constellations, other planets. You know, something must have had to blow that up to, lock that travel and connection to these other systems.
Yeah, the whole pyramid grid has been broken. The connection energetically has been broken by the removing the capstones. Some pyramids completely, as you've seen, blown up, demolished. Some pulverized and turned back into sand, right? You've seen it. You've been there just like I have. And disconnecting the portal nodes so that people like regular people like us can't travel through them or find a way to access those portal points. That's what I personally believe. I found some information and some records where it talked about the Jed pillar. That would be the Ankh. But inside the Ankh, there's a Jed, which looks like a Tesla coil, inserted into the oval area. And that Jed pillar Ankh, acts like a capacitor. Now, it stored and saved the subatomic frequency of the person that held it. And only elite gods had access to these portals. In other words, their guards and some random people couldn't just go, let me get into this portal and pop to the other side of the country or pop to another star system. If your code or your frequency wasn't programmed into the Saba, which is the Stargate, then you would be obliterated. Your atoms would be ripped apart. So you had to have the Jed pillar Ankh. You had to be holding it when you walked into the gate or when you put the key in the notch so that it read your frequency. It knew that you were allowed to pass through. And then from there, it would allow you to travel to whatever point you were supposed to be going to.
Wow. And you said that you believe that the Earth is an abandoned seed colony, a planet that was found in the outer rings of the Milky Way galaxy to preserve the human form. Yeah. What do you feel, they were trying to preserve about the human form or us? What were they trying to preserve?
I believe that the human form is one of the most prominent forms throughout the known universe. In other words, forward-looking eyes, hands that have fingers that can manipulate the environment, right? and a brain that has enough capacity and size to think and operate within logic, make logical decisions. And I think that this is the prominent state. And the heart, which is another brain actually. And so this format, this bilateral bipedal organism, which we call hominid, with forward-looking eyes and these hands, is what separates us from the majority of animals in the universe. Because, for example, whales are highly intelligent, smarter than human beings. Dolphins, smarter than human beings. But they don't have these appendages. And because they don't have these, they can't manipulate their environment. So we have that capability. And this is why I believe this form is one of the only forms that can really traverse space and time. So if you look at the ancient texts, you find that there seems to be an origin point for a lot of these wars. And unfortunately, wars go back millions of years. It's not me saying this, it's in the ancient text. And these wars originate in the Pleiadian star system. And these wars between the people in the Pleiades are wars over resources, power, and control. The same reason always seems to permeate and persist throughout the universe for whatever reason. But at one point, they use a weapon called the Brahmahama Astra. The Brahmahama Astra is a weapon that once it's released, it can't be withdrawn. It can't be pulled back. It can't be stopped. And it can kill any man on 3 worlds. This is a powerful weapon that can destroy planets. It's like the Death Star in ancient text. And if you can imagine living in a star system where planets are blowing up and moons are being blown up, that debris can hit your planet at any moment, destroying your planet or your moon wherever you're living. So what do? You flee. So this was the first instance of space refugees, which I talk about in my TV series, Anunnaki, Ancient Secrets Revealed. The first occurrence of space refugees. Nobody's talked about this before but me. I'm the first one to talk about it. They fled that region of the sky in their vehicles, whoever had the ability to get into one, and they started inhabiting new star systems throughout the galaxy. Orion and Aldebaran and Sirius and wherever, Ursa Minor, wherever they can get to. And of course, our sun, Sol, they came here too, to planets orbiting this star. They created breakaway civilizations. Now, something that they also did was to preserve our species, someone brought people here and left them here to start over. And how do we know this? How do I know this? Well, I sat down with Aboriginal elders in the outback. And I have one coming on my podcast very soon, by the way, which is great. So people can hear from their own mouths. Their handed down history for thousands of years, their verbal handed down history is that they were seeded on this planet by Pleiadians. Now let's travel to the other side of the world, to the Hopi tribe and the Lakota tribe. Their verbal handed down history is what? They were seeded on this planet by who? By Pleiadians. They're star brothers from the Pleiades. How can 2 continents on the opposite side of the planet have the same exact story? And so this is, that's just one example. So it seems as if people were brought here to preserve and save this particular form of Homo sapien, or our cousins at least thousands of years ago, because they felt like we were going to potentially become extinct. It's something that we would even do now today, like we're trying to reach out to Mars. Why? Because what if Earth is destroyed? We have some people on Mars that can represent the human race. So it's not far-fetched and a far-sighted thought to do something like this, because they're trying to do it right now.
So interesting, because also going back to our conversation about the hominids, you said that we're the new kids on the block. Mm-hmm. But talking about the literal kids now on the planet, like we're seeing the recent viral series Telepathy Tapes, which I haven't personally watched, but every guest I've had on is like, watch that. Even Caroline Corey's film, Superhuman, depicts these, tells a story of these kids that like completely blindfolded, they are shown flashcards with pictures on them, and they're able to recall, oh, that's an elephant, that's a tiger, that's a this color, that color. What do you think is going on in terms of the evolution of our brain, or maybe our spiritual capacities, for us to unlock these deeper psychic potentials that we already hold?
Yeah, I think there's a few things going on. One thing is these gifts are naturally occurring gifts inside of us. We're born with them. However, we've been disconnected from them through several means. The first way we've been disconnected is from our upbringing, the way we were raised. We were raised to believe that we don't have those gifts, number one. So nobody's coming out of the womb and being taught that they have psychic ability or try to move this with your mind. Those exercises aren't being taught to us as babies. So we've been programmed to thinking that we don't have them because we haven't been taught them. So it's not even in our consciousness until we see it in a movie and think, oh, that's amazing. They have powers. That was a great movie. But no, it's real within ourselves. And so that's one method for disconnecting us. The next method for disconnecting us is in the ancient past. In some way, shape, or form, human beings, I believe, were genetically modified. In the Epic of Atrahasis, which is an ancient Sumerian tablet, they talk about taking the existing hominid on the planet and adding their essence to it, which means you're talking about tinkering with us, like taking some code and playing with our code to get us to bear the load, to get us to do the work for them, making us into a worker race, a slave race. Well, how would you do that? If you have a strong-willed civilization that's in existence on the planet, whether they're hunter-gatherers or not, but you know that we can't just take these people and just make them work for us. We have to manipulate them into working for us. I believe they genetically tinkered with us. Now, through that genetic tinkering, this could be when maybe our skulls got smaller. Maybe this could be when our pineal gland got smaller. This could be when certain genetics about us changed. I believe that they disconnected a lot of our DNA nodes. And so we call it junk DNA, but it's not junk. It's actually real functioning DNA that we have just been disconnected from in a way. And so I think, so it's a genetic tinkering also that happens. Now, some people are more sensitive to these, to their gifts than others. So depending on the way, how you're born, how you're in the embryonic stage, how you begin to develop as a fetus, whether some of those connections reactivate or not. But I believe now that we're heading into the age of Aquarius. And even over the last 50 years, and maybe even a little bit before that, but slowly but surely, more and more babies are being born, and more people are being born that are naturally adept and in touch with their natural gifts. Natural gifts. They're not special gifts, they're natural gifts. And we're starting to see this even more and more. It's like, for example, if you take a planet like Earth and there's a war here and it destroys everything. Within 100 years or 200 years, nature's going to take back over the planet again. Same thing with the human body. They try to destroy who we truly were, but now nature is reclaiming who we really are. We're going through this process of reclaiming the natural abilities and regaining the natural abilities that we were supposed to have. All that remnant DNA is coming back to the forefront. Genetics are changing. Our DNA nodes are reconnecting. And now the third reason, we're in the galactic equator right now. So our solar system, it orbits the sun. It orbits the supermassive black hole at the center of our Milky Way galaxy. Okay, so we're orbiting the supermassive black hole. Now, of course, the galaxy is millions of light years across, but it's also millions of light years thick. Even though it looks like a thin disk, it's not. Our solar system actually does this as it moves around the equator of the Milky Way black hole. It's undulating up and down, kind of like a cosine wave. We've reached this point now where we're at the exact alignment of the galactic equator with the supermassive black hole. And what's coming from the supermassive black hole? Supercharged charged particles are flowing directly at us right now, energetically more than any time before in the last who knows how many hundreds of thousands of years. So this is a great time to be alive. And this is why it's the age of Aquarius, is because we're in a position now to receive this energy, and it's altering our DNA. It's penetrating our bodies and it's hitting the DNA, and it's actually making changes to the code. So we have these three reasons why you're starting to see a different version of person, a different version of human being now evolving and coming forward. We're just reclaiming who we actually naturally are. And the universe and nature is helping us to be able to acquire that.
How are you currently feeling these charged particles of energy coming down? We just had this 6 planetary alignment phenomenon in our solar system, but I definitely can say, like, there are some days where I'm just like feeling what they call the ascension symptoms. Yeah. And I was just wondering if you had something similar of, going through these energetic shifts.
Through our meditations, I just feel so peaceful and so fulfilled. And what I do is I do something called my universal energy meditation. And in that meditation, I see my mind has a bowl in it inside of my head, and I can see a hand coming in through the skull and taking my thoughts out little by little until the thoughts are almost gone. And when the thoughts get down to a very minimum amount, I can't get rid of them all, but when I get them to a minimum amount of thoughts in my head, what I then see is I say, okay, I'm ready to receive. And then I see the universal energy, all the particles, all the energy from the universe, the love energy, the divine energy filling that bowl up. And I'll tell you now, it's filling up faster more than ever. It used to take some time, sometimes an hour, but now it's filling up almost twice as fast. And that tells me there's a shift in energy. There's something happening, and we're in the right place at the right time. We're at the beginning of something that's so grand and so great. It's going to change a paradigm on this planet.
And I feel right now we're at the precipice of the age of space exploration, which you've also talked about. And we're going to explore more of deep space. You know, Elon Musk is going to explore more of Mars. And I wanted to tie in what you know about quantum entanglement and what Einstein's theory of spooky action at a distance is going to allow us when we go out and explore deep space in terms of the communication between us and other galaxies.
Oh, for sure. One of the biggest things holding us back right now with space travel, commercial space travel, is communication. You know, who wants to get into a spaceship, fly out towards the rings of Saturn, which will be a great vacation, but if something goes wrong and you got to send a message back to Earth, that could take months to get a message back and then receive it back again from Earth with a solution to the problem. So it puts us in a very, very strange conundrum. Like, what do we do? Now, people, of course, are going to take that risk, but to be honest with you, the best thing to do would be to develop a quantum entangled communications system or array. Now, how does that work? The first thing we would do on Earth is we would master quantum entanglement. Now, quantum entanglement is when you get two particles on the same frequency, and when you change one particle, the other particle, no matter how far it is away, will change instantaneously. Now they've discovered that you can quantum entangle molecules. They've also discovered that synapses in the human brain are quantum entangling with information in other parts of the universe. And they're even saying now that sometimes our thoughts disappear from our mind and go to another dimension and then reappear again. This is all real peer-reviewed science that anyone can just look up. They got a smartphone in their hand. So scientists are saying now we can communicate. So they started discovering ways to send information through the quantum frequency. And so that means you bypass the speed of light because the change or the information travels instantaneously. So if you have a command center on Earth where the communications receiver and sender that can decode the transmission, you then have, you ship out into space, you launch out into space a satellite array. It might take a couple of years for them to get in position. So they got to go to Saturn, Jupiter, the moon, Titan, all these other places way out there. Now you're on a tourism trip out to see the rings of Saturn, and you need to communicate back with Earth. One second. Excuse me. So now you're on a big vacation heading out towards the rings of Saturn, and you have to communicate back with Earth. What do you have to do? All you have to do is transmit your message to the communications array, which could only be a few seconds, minutes, or hours away from your position in space. The communications array will then encrypt your message and send it back to Earth via quantum entanglement. The Earth receiver will get that quantum entanglement message instantaneously, and then they can respond back to you. So the only delay in sending the message and receiving a message back from the array will be your distance from the array, not your distance from Earth, speeding up communication light years ahead of what we have right now, because right now it's just crazy how slow light actually travels. That information travels so slow at the speed of light, it's not even funny. In some situations you might never get an answer back, depending on the position of Earth around the sun and what's blocking the radio frequency from getting back to you and all those crazy things you got to consider. But with quantum entanglement, it don't care about planets. It doesn't care about a sun being in the way of the Earth and being out of communications range, right? Like when Apollo went to the far side of the moon, they were out of communications range. So the comms go down when you're on the opposite side because the moon is blocking the frequency from getting back to Earth. You don't worry about that through quantum entanglement. The moon doesn't even exist. There is no moon. So it's an incredible way of incredible technology that is being developed and will revolutionize the way that we communicate through deep space, through not only through the Milky Way, but potentially if we become an intergalactic race as well.
There was a post that I saw from your Instagram account recently, which said something along the lines of, if you think the same way when you're 40 of when you were thinking in 20, then you lost 20 years of your life. So I'm really curious to know how, like when you started getting into all of this, how your theories, how your research has evolved, changed directions to get to where you are now and really expanded your worldview, and maybe some things that you might have had to discard that you learned early on, like, oh, maybe this was wrong, or maybe this was, a different direction. I'd really love to just see the evolution behind your model of reality and how you've gotten it up to this point. And I know it'll evolve in the next few years as well.
For sure. It's a constant evolution, constant change, constant asking more questions. And sometimes the answer, when you find answers to those questions, the answer to those questions begin to shift and change as we begin to learn new things and learn new information. I used to think that, for example, the speed of light was the be all end all 20 years ago, and I thought that, that was the speed, and that was the fastest information can travel throughout the known universe in terms of us being humans trying to communicate with something out there in space, and or a photon traveling from a distant star to reach our pupil. Understanding and learning about time dilation started leading me down the path of understanding that, wow, maybe the speed of light isn't the absolute limit anymore. When you start learning about time dilation and how time and light actually can be bent and can be warped and can be twisted. It took me into Einstein-Rosen bridges. So Professor Rosen and Einstein, they got together and came up with a theory for black holes and wormhole travel. And that took me into understanding and learning about warp drives. Can you make a warp bubble, and can you traverse space through a bubble where you're not actually traveling through space, but you're pulling space like a blanket, and with something sitting on top of a blanket or a tablecloth. And so as you learn these things, you realize, oh wow, because before, if I traveled at the speed of light away from Earth for a year and then came back, only 2 years would pass for me, but I think it would be 30 or 40 years would pass, or 50 years would pass for the people on Earth, some crazy number in dilation. But if I travel away from the Earth at light speed, in a warp drive for a year and come back, 2 years for me, 2 years for the people on Earth. So all these things begin to change my perception of reality and realize that, wow, time is malleable. Light is malleable. The speed of light is malleable. And then you start learning about subatomic particles. I just learned about those about maybe 8 years ago, subatomic particles, tachyons, for example, that are faster than the speed of light already. And so the deeper you go, the more you realize, like, oh, throw away the speed of light thing. The speed of light is just an illusion. It's a base point to start for particular things in general science and general physics. But when you go from a deeper level, you realize that there's things that travel far faster than the speed of light. And then you begin to learn about time travel. And you understand that a photon coming from a sun 23 million light years away, by the time when we can see it, that's 23 million years in the past at the speed of light. But the photon itself traveled instantaneously because photons don't feel time. So it only took an instant for it to get to the pupil in our eye and go into our brain. So you've started learning about this stuff and, going to ancient cultures and researching things. I thought maybe Neolithic peoples did build Göbekli Tepe. Maybe they had a part in it. Then I got there and I was there in person, and I said, oh no. And I saw how Neolithic people lived and how they survived and how they scratched out their living. And I said, oh no, they had nothing to do with building this place. I mean, nothing at all. So that was just recently. I was back in September. So over time, my perception just evolves and changes as I'm able to get out in the field, do field research. And sometimes ideas or theories get strengthened. So my idea or theory about the ancient Egyptians using power tools got strengthened by me going to Egypt over and over again and seeing these amazing cuts and seeing the tool marks that I hadn't seen 10 years ago that I'm seeing now. And just reaffirming, like, yes, they had high-powered tools of some type that we don't have today. So you get reaffirmation of things or confirmation, but you also get different perspectives, and then your I guess your perception or your theories can change and begin to vary over time. If you don't allow for that, then you're locking yourself into a particular belief system, and now you're back in dogma. And if that's the case, it's just fanaticism.
What I admire about you the most is that you are an explorer, and you're not afraid to go into that deep end, which takes time, takes a lot of dedication and discipline to really go deep. And obviously, we are at a point in history with AI and automation where the most important thing for us to be is nonlinear and multidimensional, and not just go and be an expert at one thing. Like we are here to really, there's so much available to us. It's like a menu of exploration that we can just, open up and not be just focus on one direction. And, when it comes to going within yourself and looking into those deeper layers of spiritual beliefs, where have you seen those evolve as well more recently?
Mm-hmm. The spiritual beliefs, they evolve. I would say 10 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. 20 years ago, spiritually, I had certain beliefs that I had in terms of who we are, where we came from, and how, is there a God, and all those kind of questions that everyone pretty much has. But my understanding wasn't as deep as it is now. I believe there was a creator because I had discovered the Fibonacci sequence and pi. And so not that I discovered it, but I finally came across it. It was already discovered, obviously. But you got to watch everything you say, because everyone will pick apart everything you say. So when I came across those realities and began to apply it to the human form and to nature, and then to see how human beings incorporated that information into structures like ancient temples in Greece and so forth, I was like, wow, the golden rectangle, the golden triangle. I was like, wow, this is incredible. There's a fingerprint here. Human beings knew about it, so we replicated it into structures. So we knew that something created us with this design. This is a fingerprint of a creator. That was the depth I had. That was all I had 20 years ago. Fast forward, 2017, I was doing a research for a 3.5-hour lecture that I was going to do at Contact in the Desert, California, about fractal, the fractal nature of the holographic universe. Could we be living in a hologram? Now, when they asked me what topic will you talk about, I had just started researching that information for myself, for my personal edification, probably 2 months prior. So I said, you know what, by the time this thing comes, I'll know enough and I'll do a presentation on this. And of course, now committing and signing a contract, I'm going deep into the information. And then that really just expanded my consciousness about the nature of reality, who we are and where we came from, as I begin to realize that we are living in a fractal holographic matrix, and that incorporated in that is the Fibonacci sequence, is pi, phi, is this Mandelbrot set equation, and also that Professor James Gates discovered with his team of mathematicians called the Adinkra codes, which are the codes that run the ether of space. And those are the same exact codes that run search engines and web browsers. That's what's running this reality. They discovered this in the fabric of the universe. And so as I tapped into this knowledge and information, and I go up to present this 3.5-hour lecture, it was such an incredible lecture, because not only was I teaching this information, I had just learned it all at the same time. And it was mind-blowing because it expanded my belief of an understanding of who we are and our connectedness to this divine energy, and that the fact that there is really a creator without a doubt, but that the creator used a specific type of system or coding to create the realm that we're living in, and that we're all energetically connected, and that we ourselves, our separation from each other is actually an illusion, that we are all actually one. That's when I got that confirmation, was in 2018 through this research, that there is only one consciousness. I learned that at that time, and that we're all connected, and we're just a fractal of this consciousness, giving us the illusion of individuality, the illusion of separation, the illusion of distance. But in true reality, none of that actually exists. We are one conscious being experiencing itself subjectively through what we call the third dimension or the third density. And so, but again, that was an evolution of just thinking, okay, something created this, it must be a God, to no, yes, there's a God that created this realm, universe, whatever you want to call it, but also this entity or this energy is a sophisticated programmer on top of everything else, which to me is incredible, to create this realm, this illusory realm where we now know that atoms are 99.999% empty space. So there's nothing really here. And if there's nothing really here, how can we see and touch things? It's all based on electromagnetic fields. Your fingers don't touch anything. Your fingers repel. The electrons orbiting the atoms in your fingers repel the electrons in the microphone. And then all of a sudden you get this sensation. You think you're touching it, you're repelling it. And it just goes deeper and deeper. And I began to realize, like, wow, we're living in a hologram, but it's imbued with this divine energy. But from where? It's our higher self. It's our direct connection to God. We're a fractal of God itself, experiencing itself in this matrix for the purpose, in my opinion, of gathering information, experiencing life in the third dimension. So yeah, the evolution happens, man, over time.
Yeah. And I always have to ask you that because, for those people that don't know, this is our 5th interview together in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And, it's been such a blessing because I've learned so much. I'm looking right now, I have a Google Doc called Billy Carson, over 30 pages filled with just research I've done from your knowledge. And it's just so beautiful because I looked back at all the pages and I'm like, I had to extract one quote that I got from you once where it says, if everyone could truly understand what I know and what I've been able to grasp, then all the things that divide us would start to fall apart. And I'm looking around and I'm seeing a world of polarity. I'm seeing a world, we just had the recent inauguration, elections, and people are so divided right now. To really hone that point in of knowing what would fall apart in the terms of like us in our division together, how would you really hone that point in terms of shifting us back into unity consciousness and that we are already one, all really just one that you just said?
I think first and foremost that the people on the planet have to first admit and realize that they've all been a part of something. They've all been a part and in collusion with giving up their power. We have the power and we always have had the power. The power is inside of us, but we've ignored that internal power and we've given our power away to outside sources. And those outside sources have taken that power and they have wielded it against us. And we have to admit and agree that yes, we have allowed this. And I mean we, including myself, we all have allowed this. We have allowed this to happen to ourselves. Accountability. We have to take accountability for the situation that we have allowed ourselves to be put in globally, all of us, all walks of life. And that includes all races, all levels of finance, everything else. So once we can come to that realization that we have to understand that we have put ourselves in this position through collusion, through participating, then we have to say, well, what can we do about it? The first thing we can do is we can stop giving away our power and go to our inner space. Forget outer space. Let's go to inner space. Let's learn how to love ourselves. What I've seen, and even in the most recent situations that happened, even with myself, the biggest problem why people are so evil and so angry and so willing to attack and troll and everything else is because they don't love themselves. There is a lack of self-love in the world within a lot of people. Not everyone, but in billions of people, there's a lack of self-love. And this is something I had to learn myself, and not too long ago, that I wasn't loving myself properly, that I didn't have enough self-love. I learned this maybe back in 2017, 18, that I was realizing, like, where's my self-love at? Am I loving myself enough? And it's something that doesn't cross a lot of people's minds. We take that for granted. It's all about, I got to love somebody. I got to love my relative. I got to love my spouse. I got to love my boyfriend or girlfriend. I got to love my kids. I got to love people. What about yourself? Have you taken time to love yourself? And what does that look like? And what does it actually mean? Well, it means that you sit with yourself. A lot of people can't sit with themselves for more than a minute. They got to interact with something, someone. They call it being social. They're looking for a reason to distract themselves from themselves because they can't stand to be with themselves. That's because they don't have the self-love. And this is what's hurting the majority of the people on the planet right now, causing them to lash outward instead of going inward and fixing the internal problems. And the reason why people don't have the self-love is because their body is trying to protect itself from trauma. They have trauma in their body that has happened from the time they were born all the way up until whatever date or age they are at this exact moment. And they haven't addressed those traumas. They haven't done the shadow work. They haven't gone back to revisit those situations, to talk about them, discuss them, to bring them up, to analyze them and process them out of the body so that they can begin to then bring and open themselves up for love. See, if you're filled all the way to here with decades of trauma, there's no space for love. There's no space for self-love. You have to begin to do the work to drop the trauma, drop and process it out of the body and make space inside this vessel so that you can actually be open to receive your own love. And once you can do that and you can begin to forgive yourself for things that you may feel like you may have done wrong or been wronged or whatever, or forgive other people, now you're opening yourself up even more. And once you get to that point, now you're a vessel of light and you can begin now to really, really connect with people in a totally different way because you've connected with yourself. You can begin to see people in a different way because you've seen yourself in a different way. And you can see yourself in others also, and you can have more empathy. Okay. And then once that happens, if people are doing this process, now we'll be able to see each other as brothers and sisters, not enemies and competition. We've been so programmed in this world right now today that everything is about competition over collaboration. In other words, the second people wake up, they're going to see, let me check this account and see if they got more followers than me. Let me check this account to see if they got more likes than me. How come this guy got more likes than me? How come this guy's getting more famous than me? How come they look like they got more money than me? It's this competition mindset that's destroying us because we have no self-love. And this causes and forces this outlashing. But once we can have the self-love, the competition mindset starts to die down. We shift into a mindset of collaboration. When we get into the collaboration mindset, now we're working in unity together. That brings in the unified mindset, the unified consciousness. And when we get into that mind, we can organize. And when we organize, we can take back control of this planet and live through our birthright. We'll drop religion. We'll drop politics. We'll drop domination. We will drop, situations in government where they're just ruling over us and taking all of our rights away. We'll drop things like big pharma and all these other things. They will die and fall away. Why? Because we won't allow it anymore. And when we won't allow something as a group, as an organized group on the same frequency, it must stop. It will stop because it has to, because we're controlling what's happening to us, not the other way around. People think that they're doing this to us and Trump is doing this to us and Biden's doing this to us. No, we're doing this to us. It's the hardest thing to admit is that we're the ones that are doing it to ourselves. We have to look in the mirror or open up your selfie mode on your phone, take a picture and look at it. That's the person that's responsible for your current condition. No one else. Take full accountability for it and start loving yourself. And when we do that, we get into a different frequency and the whole planet will shift into that frequency when we get a certain number of people loving themselves the right way, and then the whole universe will shift.
Beautiful, brother. And what are your thoughts now after, the recent situation that happened with regards to collaborating with people that have completely different beliefs than us? What are your thoughts on that now? Great
question. Man, that's a great question. When this happened, I got contacted by people who do have different beliefs than me. Doctors in theology and doctors in Assyriology and PhDs in Assyriology and Babylonian and theology. I mean, all these super-minded scholars that have been doing this for decades, 15 years through grad school and all this, and professors in universities, they contacted me they put me in this group WhatsApp. And they were talking about the situation, and they were saying that they weren't pleased with what happened, even though they don't agree with everything that I believe in. But they were not pleased with how it happened, what happened, and they thought that a lot of my answers, believe it or not, they said that I was actually correct. You just needed to word them a little bit differently, but your idea and your understanding was absolutely correct, which is good.
What parts of those ideas?
They were talking about when I was referencing the fact that the biblical text had been copied from ancient texts. I said you can't say in academics you can't use the word copied. You have to. There's another way to phrase it, but it means the same thing. So when you're going against somebody who has been taught in the verbiage of academics, if you say copied, oh no, it's not copied, and they'll hit you like that, and they'll get you off kilter because you're not ready for that, even though it does mean the same thing. Or what else was it that I was talking about? There was a few other topics in there that I had mentioned, and they were just like, yeah, you were actually right. So I'm getting them on a roundtable discussion. So we're going to have this huge roundtable discussion, people from all different thoughts, and one of them is even, I believe he's actually an atheist. So we have an atheist, we have a theologist, we have a Syriologist, we have expert in ancient linguistics, and text, and they're all going to come together in the same. And we have a 33-year archdeacon from the church, so they're all going to come together in one place at the same time, and we're going to have a roundtable discussion, and we're going to rehash a lot of information. People with totally different understandings and belief systems, but also can have the root back to the actual academics. What do we glimpse from this information? What do we get from this text? What do we get from this scripture? What do we get? And so we're going to make that, and we're going to make all the correlations, and people will see that we might not agree on everything, but guess what? It's actually okay. It's okay to not agree with everything. It's okay to see things from a different perspective based on your own interpretation. But at the root foundation of academics, this is what's here. And so I'm looking forward to doing that because I think the world needs to see something like that.
100% agree with you. And another Instagram post that came in, I think yesterday, it was anger turned into determination is actually a high frequency. Don't hold it in your body. It will only poison you. Transmute it into courage and willingness. Emotional alchemy is one of the highest forms of magic you can do in human form. And I think this initiative of saying like, I don't know everything. Like you guys have been studying this for 30, 40 years. Let's all get together in a roundtable. That's also been one of my visions in the podcast, is doing more roundtable discussions and coming to a collaboration of how can we deepen our own level of understanding about the world through different perspectives. I'll say it again. There are many reflections from the same river that we all drink from. There's the capital T truth, but we can only hold the lowercase t in our bodies because we are in this human form. So going also, again, talking about the emotional alchemy, you did a conversation with Dr. Daniel Amen where he was able to guide you through some traumatic experiences. And that brought in a lot of alchemy as well. If you want to talk about the role of being able to talk about our past and our traumas and what we've, experienced in the past in order to create that magic in human form to come out stronger on the other end.
Absolutely. It's a tough thing to do. The reason why a lot of people don't grow is because they're afraid to address their trauma, and they can't find or don't see the trauma link. Like what triggered you? So when this thing happened with this whole controversy, I got attacked very, very, very hard, and my family got attacked. And the attack was very brutal, not physically attacked, spiritually attacked and mentally attacked through trolling and other things. And we went on high alert. And of course, when somebody attacks your family, automatically you go into defensive mode because you're there to protect. I'm the protector of my family at any cost. And even though it's a digital attack, you digitally protect your family is what my brain went to. But I didn't do it the right way. And I made a digital attempt to protect my family by making a video, which wasn't my greatest video. It didn't really show me in my true light. I wasn't screaming and cursing and carrying on in the video, but I was making very egotistical statements and things like that on there, kind of bragging a little bit and saying some things that I really didn't mean, just because I had no other way of lashing out at these people for what they had done to us and how they set us up and all the death threats and everything to my wife and kid and everything. So I made a video, which wasn't my greatest time in my life and my career. So I wanted some healing, and I wanted to be able to find out, why did I do that? Like, why I sat back and I said, well, why did I make this video like this in this particular way? Something totally out of my character. And I asked my wife, I said, can you get a hold of Dr. Amen and see if he would do a session with me? Now, he's my psychiatrist. So it wasn't like I didn't know Dr. Amen. I had been to him for 2 SPECT scans of my brain, and he actually healed my brain from a brain injury from a car accident that I was in 1991. And he agreed to do it. And I said, we should film this because it's going to be embarrassing a little bit, I ain't gonna lie, and very tough to do, to be that exposed and that
vulnerable,
that raw, vulnerable. But it was like, if I do this and show people what doing trauma work is like and doing the shadow work is like, they may have enough courage to do it themselves. So we decided to do that, and he agreed. And so I went to do a real session with Dr. Amen to address the trauma, number one, to find out what the link was with my trauma. And he was able to guide me into finding that link to something from my childhood that was very traumatic, where I felt like I was betrayed, and to bring that to the forefront and to understand that became now a thing that's in my life. Whenever I feel betrayed, it's triggering this automatic response for me where the blood leaves my frontal lobe, it goes to my hindbrain, I lose all sense of logic, and I do stupid things. And I can then begin to see the track record of this happening, different situations in my life where I felt betrayed and I did something similar, something dumb, something out of my character, because I wasn't processing logically from the logical part of the brain. He was able to help me see that. Once I brought awareness to why I responded that way and why I made that video, I was able to alchemically convert that in my body, shift it, process it, move it out of the body, but also I was able to learn from it and then take the energy from that and convert that into positivity, convert it into courage, convert it into vulnerability, convert it into a teaching session for other people all around the world, and get them to see this is how you address situations properly as a grown man or a grown woman, as an adult. This is how you do it. And so he helped me alchemically convert darkness into light, which is what Thoth is all about from the Emerald Tablets. He's all about taking darkness, converting it into light. That's why he's depicted as an ibis bird with the big beak. So it was a tough experience to go through, and that's why a lot of people don't want to do it, because you have to face things that your body has hidden deep within your psyche so that it can protect you. It thinks it's protecting you, but what it's actually doing is making you more sick. So what happens is these things that we've had happen to us in the past that create these triggers, these traumas, they hide in the body and they create dis-ease. It can come across as back pain, neck pain, stress, ulcers in the gut. But this dis-ease eventually turns into disease. And then that disease will eventually have you pushing up daisies, where you'll be 6 feet under. So you have to understand, to process those things, it's going to take courage. It's going to take vulnerability. It's going to take being open. And it's going to take your ability to take that information and process it out of the body and alchemically convert that into something positive. And when you do that, you shift into a higher frequency. I felt like the world's weight was taken off my shoulders after that session with him. I literally walked out of there feeling like a brand new human being.
And where do you tie in the frequency of forgiveness in all of that healing that you had?
Powerful. With the frequency of healing, what my wife and I did was we decided to do a special forgiveness meditation, where we envisioned the people that were all involved in this. And there were more than one. There was quite a few people. And even the people that came on the actual attack, even the people that showed up at our office trying to attack in person. And we did a meditation of forgiveness where through the meditation, we were just sending love and positivity to those people, and envisioning that love and that positivity in some way entering their minds and their hearts, so that in the future, when it comes up to anything that triggers them into acting like how they acted, maybe they can shift and catch themselves. Maybe that light, that energy, that positivity, that love energy will kick in and will get them to question their actions in the future. So that's what we did. And that was part of our forgiveness, that we did alchemically to also take another weight of load. And when we got done doing that meditation, another huge weight was lifted off of us, because the stress of thinking about those people or seeing their faces online or whatever, that initial feeling of that angst or that frustration, it just left. It's gone.
Yeah. I can't remember the last time I was, watching on my TV a grown man, not an actor, a grown man actually crying and being vulnerable enough to tell a story of his past that hurt him and how it was hurting and replaying again in the present moment. Yeah. It made me think about a lot of things. We'll link that conversation that you had with Dr. Amen in the show notes. Such a beautiful, like, alchemical performance. I would say, like, that was what needed to be done, and I felt like that was the right decision. Thank you for having the courage to show yourself in that light and also be very open and vulnerable in this conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We end every podcast with a segment called the Final Trio, which are little questions that we ask at the end. But before that, where would you send people to connect with you, go down the rabbit hole with you, and, take part in anything else that you're embarking on in the future?
Well, we have our Forbidden Knowledge TV network, the number 4, Forbidden Knowledge TV. The app is on the App Store, Google Play, iPhone, Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, LG TV, Samsung TV, pretty much everywhere. Just look for the Forbidden Knowledge TV app. A lot of great content there that you can't get on YouTube, as well as a lot of free content. We do have also some subscription content as well, some for $8 a month. You get a lot of workshops and classes and training, and a lot of documentaries and TV series that we have up there, which are just mind-blowing in my opinion. And then, of course, we have our website, forbiddenknowledge.com, which we have our world tours. We're going to Peru in July. There's a few spots up for Peru. If somebody wants to come hike Peru with us for 10 days and go see the most amazing things and hike up Rainbow Mountain and celebrate up there with us. And then, of course, we have our Egypt tour in October. This will be our 4th Egypt tour. Last year, we took 100 people to go see the most amazing sites throughout Egypt, and we're going to do it again this October. So if you want to go to Egypt or Peru, go to forbiddenknowledge.com and click on our world tour link, and you'll find out more information on how you can register for our tours.
Beautiful. And again, all of that will be down in the show notes with the links attached to it. And for the final trio, the first question I had for you is, when was the last time your heart felt the most open?
I would say my heart felt the most open just recently when we did this guided meditation to send love and light to the people that we felt hurt us or attacked us. That was my heart had just weeks ago. My heart felt the most open during that process. It really took me to another level consciously and spiritually. I really feel like for me to be able to do that with such a crazy situation and such a hardcore attack, it really showed the growth within my life and my wife's life.
And I have seen literal quantum shifts in my life the moments my heart opens. And recently going to the Dr. Joe Dispenza retreat, like, I was like beaming, came out of that experience beaming. And then after that, met someone really special and just things started unfolding in my life. So I support the fact that when we open our hearts, everything changes in our life. So thank you for honing that in. And the second question I had is, if you could place one universal truth into the heart of every human being today to awaken them to their highest potential, what would that truth be and why?
The truth would be that literally love is the key. I know we hear it a lot. We hear people say love is the highest frequency, but it's true. Love is the key. It's the key to us entering into the next golden age. And if they can place that key into their heart and unlock it and open it up so that it can receive even more love, then this world will shift in the blink of an eye, literally. And so I think that people need to focus on understanding that before you come with hate, take a moment and pause, take a deep breath and say, how can I love this person better?
Powerful stuff. When you reflect on the journey of your soul, what do you feel it has been preparing you for in this particular lifetime?
I just feel it's been preparing me for the battle. This is, there's no way to rename it. It's a battle. It's a spiritual battle. And it's a battle for souls. It's a battle to, and when I say for souls, not that I'm trying to acquire souls, but it's a battle to get enough people on the same frequency where they can free themselves. I'm not here to free anybody. I'm only here, like Tupac said, to spark the brain of the people that will free themselves. And it's just the preparation and everything that I've been through since birth, being in a birth where I came out and took me a month to get home because I was fighting for my life, because I was hemorrhaging in the hospital. And so I came in with a rough start, growing up in abject poverty, growing up with an abusive father that was an alcoholic and a drug addict, and all these other things that I had to go through, all the attacks and all the racism that I had to grow up under in the 70s and the 80s, and all the fights I had to get into, and everything else. And all the life-changing events that happened, whether it was a car accident, whether it was the pneumonia, or anything that a person can be considered as, how in the world do you keep going with all this stuff that has happened to you? It was all preparation, and I wouldn't change any of it. I wouldn't take one thing out, because it has made me who I am today, and I'm very pleased with who I am today. Because am I perfect? No. But when I do make a mistake, I can own up to it, and I'm man enough to be able to be accountable for my own actions. And I'm also powerful enough to be able to forgive myself and others, which is a thing that I think most people need to realize is one of the most powerful things you can actually do, is to forgive yourself and others. So that's what I would say. It's just it's prepared me for the battle to help be a person that's considered a pioneer in helping mankind move back towards a golden age.
So many keys scattered out throughout this conversation, brother. I just keep pulling Instagram quotes that you had. And one was, if you see someone who has good light, thank them for it. It will help them keep the light on. So thank you, brother, for being that light. Thank you for being open to this conversation. And thank you for the work that you're doing and will continue to do. Appreciate you so much, brother. And I can't wait to continue these conversations for lifetimes.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate it. Thank you so much, man.
Of course.